I didn't learn Spanish in a traditional way. I didn't go to a class, sit down, and go through the books. I actually learned it out of necessity on my own while working as a deputy sheriff in a Florida county that attracted tens of thousands of migrant farm workers, most of whom were from Mexico. It was like being in a total immersion Spanish program every single day. During those early years, obviously I made more than my fair share of mistakes when speaking Spanish. I mean, that's how we learn, right? But one that really sticks out in my head is when I would go to somebody's house to conduct an investigation because they'd called law enforcement. When I was done, I would say, "Estoy saliendo ahora." I'm leaving now. Adios. I mean, it made sense in my head. Salir is to leave. Estoy saliendo. I'm leaving. Well, I did do this for a while until one day, and I remember, an older Mexican woman, right after I said it to her, looked at me and said, "Señor, no diga eso. Diga, ya me voy o me voy." That's when I learned that the verb salir didn't mean exactly what I thought it meant. And thinking back, I really should have known because, well, nobody was saying estoy saliendo when they were leaving a place. That's a pretty good indication. So in this video, in case anybody else wants to know how to use salir correctly, that's what I'm going to be talking about. And in order to teach it to you, I'm also going to have to throw in ir and the pronominal form IRSE and show you how they all interrelate. But before I do, I just want to talk about the sponsor of our video, Lingopie. They are a fantastic resource for anyone who wants to work on their listening comprehension in Spanish. And of course, that's all of us, right? Now, I know I said sponsored video. I get a lot of offers to sponsor certain products and services, and I'll tell you I turn down 99% of them, but I really like this product. You're going to see me talk about them in other videos as well. With Lingopie, you get access to a large catalog of Spanish language television shows and movies, and these aren't dubbed, they're in that native language. Now, I know folks are going to be like, okay, I can watch Spanish language programming anywhere, Paul. How is this different? It gives you something you're not going to be able to get just watching YouTube videos in Spanish. Think of it as enhanced programming. Over here, you're going to have the text go by, and if you don't know a particular word or phrase, you can click on it. The video will stop, it'll tell you what it means, and even more importantly, it will add it to your word list. Then you can take that word list and go into some other features in Lingopie and say, you know, test yourself with flashcards all in the same program. Learning vocabulary is one thing, but what if you have a question about the grammar? I mean, those are going to come up all the time, right? Well, Lingopie has you covered there too. You're just going to click on this little button here, and you're going to get a full description of the grammar being used in that particular section. I find this extremely useful. So there you have it. That's a look at Lingopie. If you want to try it for free, you can do so up to 7 days. You'll find a link to it in the description section of this video, and it will also be pinned to the top of the comments section. All right, so let's go ahead and move on with the subject of the day. I'm going to be talking about ir and IRSE together first before going on to salir. So ir is to go and IRSE is the pronominal form. When I say pronominal form, that is referring to verbs that have that extra se added in the infinitive. That is our reflexive pronoun. I know some folks watching are like, okay, I thought the verbs ending in se were reflexive verbs, Paul. Yes, reflexive verbs also end in se. All reflexive verbs are pronominal verbs, but not all pronominal verbs are reflexive verbs. You see, reflexive verbs reflect back on the person. Como me lavo, I wash myself. But not every verb in Spanish that ends in se in the infinitive is reflexive. For example, quejarse, to complain. That's not reflexive, and it doesn't have a non-pronominal form. So to keep life simple, you know what? Call them all pronominal verbs. You'll never be wrong. Just saying. One thing you have to keep in mind when you're working with pronominal verbs is that when you conjugate them, you have to also pay attention to that reflexive pronoun and make sure it agrees with your conjugation. You see, the reflexive pronouns have to agree, right? So we have me voy, te vas, se va, etc. So sometimes you're going to be using ir, and sometimes you're going to be using IRSE. So how are you going to know? With ir, the focus is going to a particular place. Voy a la tienda. I go to the store, or I'm going to the store. With IRSE, the focus is on going away from the place or leaving the place that you're at, more on the motion in that direction, not on the destination. I often tell people to think of it more as heading out. Me voy, I'm heading out, I'm leaving. You'll notice I just said, I'm leaving. See, this is a good alternative for that type of leaving in English. So your coworker's packing up their stuff and you ask them, ¿Te vas? Are you leaving? Are you heading out? Sí, me voy. Hasta mañana. Yeah, I'm headed out. I'm going. See you later. It also works when somebody's already left a place. ¿Dónde está Juan? Ya se fue. Where's Juan? He already left. He already headed out. Now this part is important. You will hear IRSE used with a location named in the same sentence, but the meaning is a little bit different. In those types of sentences, the emphasis is on the heading out part, the journey part. Here's an example, okay? Let's just look at ir. María fue a Estados Unidos. Maria went to the US. That was in past tense, just using ir. We know she arrived, or we're assuming she arrived. Seems like a completed action. Now compare that to irse. María se fue para Estados Unidos, or se fue a Estados Unidos. Maria headed out for the United States. It's not clear if she arrived in the United States. She headed out. Well, maybe she made it, maybe she didn't. We're not sure with that particular sentence. Do you see the difference? Irse is useful in the command form when you want to tell somebody to go away. Vete, that's the informal, the tú form. Vete, go away. Or if you're going to use the usted form, you could say váyase, váyase. And if you want to tell somebody not to go away, then in the informal, no te vayas, no te vayas. Don't go, right? Don't go away. And in the formal, the usted form, no se vaya, no se vaya. Now let's talk about the verb salir. This verb means to leave, to go out, or to exit. There is a subtle distinction between irse and salir in certain contexts when you want to translate to leave. This is a distinction that we don't really have in English because we're just using to leave for all of these things. And that's why this can be a source of confusion for English speakers. Now, I think the best way for you to understand the difference between salir and irse is to break salir down into certain categories and give you examples, and then hopefully you'll start to see how they differ. So let's go ahead and do that. Salir is useful when the emphasis is on the place you're leaving. Think of it as departing from a place. You're going to see this a lot when you're talking about trains, planes, things like that, leaving. ¿A qué hora sale el tren? What time does the train leave? What time does the train depart? And if it helps you think of departure, departing, you might want to try to link that in your head with salir. ¿A qué hora sale el avión? What time does the plane depart? What time does the plane leave? You can use this with people, and again, it's the emphasis on leaving the place. And this is where you're going to see some overlap there with irse. For example, I might ask somebody, ¿A qué hora tienes que salir de casa para llegar a tiempo? What time do you have to leave the house to arrive on time? The emphasis being on the leaving the house, going out from the house in order to arrive on time. Another way that we use salir is to translate the English to go out. ¿Quieres salir este fin de semana? Do you want to go out this weekend? Now, if you want to say to go out to do something, this is going to be your formula. Salir a plus infinitive. Remember, the infinitive is the unconjugated verb, and that's to go out to do something. ¿Quieres salir a cenar? Do you want to go out to eat dinner? And if you're not familiar with the verb cenar, it means to eat dinner. If I just said you want to go out to eat, that would be ¿Quieres salir a comer? You'll hear me say this a lot in my videos. Anytime you have a verb that takes an unexpected preposition, and that is the a here after salir, you should list it that way on your word list so you don't forget it. So I would have salir a plus infinitive to go out to do something. Now in English, going out can also mean to go on a date or be dating someone, right? You're going out with someone. Well, it can mean the exact same thing in Spanish, which, well, makes it a lot easier to remember, right? For example, how long have Juan and Maria been dating? ¿Cuánto tiempo llevan saliendo Juan y María? And if you're not familiar with that one construction being used there, you have llevar plus the gerund. And that's how we can say how long something's been going on. And for Latin America, a lot of times you're going to see tener in there. Tener plus the gerund is a great alternative in much of Latin America. See how we learn so many other things in these videos? We go off on these little tangents all the time. If you want to say that someone is going out with someone, you're also going to use that same preposition, con, means with in Spanish. So that also makes it pretty easy. For example, mi ex está saliendo con mi mejor amigo. My ex is going out with my best friend. Certainly sounds like one of those topics for one of those scandalous like talk shows, huh? I do enjoy watching those in Spanish because I find them kind of entertaining. Salir can also be used as in to be published or to come out when we're referring to publications, shows, or releases. La nueva película de ese director sale en junio. That director's new movie comes out in June, like it leaves in June. One unexpected but very common way that salir is used in Spanish is to describe outcomes or results. For example, el informe salió mejor de lo esperado. The report turned out better than expected. It left better than expected. El examen me salió difícil. The exam turned out to be difficult for me. It was difficult for me, but literally it left difficult for me. ¿Cómo te salió la entrevista? How did the interview go for you? How did the interview leave for you? Now, in those examples there that I just gave you, those last two, you actually have an indirect object pronoun before the verb. That's how we're going to emphasize that the action affected a particular person. Now let's revisit that phrase that started this whole thing. Remember that one? Estoy saliendo. I'd be like, estoy saliendo ahora. Adios. Is anybody ever going to say, estoy saliendo? Yes, you may hear it in certain contexts. One way I may hear it is if I'm not talking to a person who's necessarily right in front of me. Maybe, my wife's called me at work and she's like, hey, when are you coming home? Have you left yet? And you're like, estoy saliendo ahora. I'm leaving now, like I'm leaving from work. Now, an important note about that. Although you could say, estoy saliendo, it is more common to say, ir saliendo, right? Well, of course you have to conjugate the ir. So, voy saliendo. Ya voy saliendo. I'm on my way. I'm leaving right now. That's really the one you should stick with. Because in some areas, they're going to hear estoy saliendo and they're going to go, I like voy saliendo. Well, that's it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego. And yes, I stretched that intentionally. Hasta luego. It's kind of my thing.